or what you'd like to get out of today. But also, which concert you attended. Your first concert was probably also good.
That's always a good icebreaker question. And you get the most horrendous answers too.
Yeah. There'll be no judgment, Hi, Marike.
Right. Okay.
Hi, Ranjini.
Perfect.
Oops, sorry. Yes. Hi, Ranjini. Hi, Marike.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So good to see you. And first and foremost, welcome, Roshan. Wanjiru is going to open the session today. And we have lots of space for Q&A. I only prepared a few questions, but in my experience, the fewer the questions, often the more profound. So these are questions that each, I think, would deserve a whole book. But before we get started, I just want to make sure that I've given Roshan a proper introduction. So, and you can correct me, Roshan. So this is actually a test of how strong your personal brand is. If I've actually incorporated all of this, all of the information I've received about you over the years in the right way. So Roshan was educated at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where he studied with, amongst others, Marshall Gantz, who's like this kind of the godfather of storytelling, which I imagine was an amazing experience. You started your career at Ashoka, and then had this massive insight that we weren't actually training professionals for the social sector. So how we make a difference in the world is actually like, it is a profession, it is a skill. You founded the Amani Institute with the goal of training those impact professionals. And after 10 amazing years in which you've probably educated hundreds, if not thousands of people and started, many people on a track of creating a difference in the world, you have now stepped out of Amani and you're pursuing a new chapter in your life. And we have several different ties that bind us. So I know Roshan through Think, a school that I attended myself. I know Roshan from teaching at Amani Institute, I think 8 or 9 years now in a row. Getting up there in age. And Roshan is also the reason probably why I met my husband. And I can also tell you he's excellent with little children. So all reasons why I thought it would be.
There's no way to talk about your husband, Anne, but anyway.
But so many reasons why I would, spend an hour with you gladly any day. But the reason why I wanted to have you speak to us in the Brand Change community is because a lot of us are building careers of purpose or attempting to do so. It's obviously incredibly hard. And I know that you have a wealth of knowledge and you have an upcoming book about the topic as well. So it's really lovely to have you on board. Have I missed anything essential?
Nope. I think sounds like the brand is working so far. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to do this. Of course, I would say yes to anything you asked me to do. So it's a delight
let me think
here.
about that one.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Wanjiru, do you want to share the rules of the room with everyone?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. And we're just going to jump into it. So a few rules to guide us and guide the session. Feel free to chat away. We encourage conversations, so you can make friends, share the link to your LinkedIn profile, introduce yourself, tell us which part of the world you're in. As the session goes on, if you have any questions or need clarification on anything that's said, feel free to interact. Raise your virtual hand or just unmute yourself and speak. And as we interact, also be kind. We try to accommodate all people who join our sessions. And also feel free to share your gifts. We're here to learn from each other. So if you have a unique perspective or skill or experience, feel free to go ahead and share that with us. And we also employ the law of 2 feet here. So if you feel that you're not learning anything or the session is not what you were expecting, feel free to leave and we will welcome you with open arms for the next session. And hopefully that will go a bit better for you. For most of us, English is not our first language. So don't let that stop you from contributing. Someone in the group will hopefully help us understand each other better. Turn on your video. We encourage the many and diverse faces that join our sessions. We don't care about messy hair or pets or children or beautiful backgrounds in gardens. Everything is welcome. The session is also going to be recorded. So we would like to let you know well in advance. And if you object, we will unfortunately not be able to host you. Then the sessions, such as today's sessions, are made possible by the members of the paying members of our community. And we don't sell the results or the video or the recording. And we're going to respect the privacy of all the members who are present.
Cool. We have no secret. We have no secret deal with Roshan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for
in my retirement,
yeah. So for anyone who is new and who has not attended this session, our community sessions before, a brief introduction on who we are. So what's Brand the Change? So Brand the Change started out as the book written by Anne Miltenberg, who is present with us. And this translated into the brand development method and process that we use, as well as the cases. We have case studies that we employ in our programs, such as the Brand Change Academy. And that has also resulted in the community where we have this session hosted. This is an online community of brand professionals and social entrepreneurs. And if you're not a member yet, we would encourage you to join us. And you're going to hopefully attend more amazing sessions such as today's. We also have other events in the community. So we have a personal branding mastermind group, which is hosted by Hanneke. We have the Brand Change Academy. We have an ongoing session and the next intake for September is ongoing. We have a facilitator think tank and we have a Lisbon meetup, which is currently online.
Thanks, Manju. Cool. Roshan, welcome again. I'm really curious if you can give us some background to this kind of big shift that we're seeing with a lot more people around the world looking for careers of purpose, looking for a way to make a difference. Where do you think that is coming from?
Sure. Firstly, thanks for the invite again, Anne and Wanjiru, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee in the US. I'm on a road trip. You know, so it's a morning for me, but I know, so good afternoon to those of you in Africa and Europe. Good evening to those of you all the way in Asia or Australia. Good night soon, perhaps, for you there. So thanks for joining. I know we're all doing lots of Zoom calls and all of that these days. So, you know, I really don't take for granted your attention for this next hour. So where is this whole, you know, conversation about careers of purpose coming from? I would say, like, really big picture, that our, you know, modern psychology is actually finally catching up with ancient religion and what it's been saying for centuries. So I'm not a religious person, but I, you know, do know that whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's Buddhism, all religions have to do, you know, their main message is help other people and do as much good for others as you can. And today, psychology is catching up with that. there's lots of research showing that when we have a larger purpose than just ourselves, making money or, feeding our family or achieving our own, like highest promotion, when we have a greater purpose than that, something to do with helping other people, something to do with helping the planet, we actually end up leading more fulfilled and happier lives. One example comes from this organization called the Happiness Research Institute, and they did a study that showed that the when you account for all other factors, having a purpose is the single a larger purpose than making money is the single largest predictor of job satisfaction out there, right? So that's one. I think it's also being driven in more recent times by some big global shifts. So 9/11, the financial crash of 2008, in 2016, and for many people, and the kind of rightward shift for global politics and society, the climate change, coming effects of climate change, COVID as well. All of these have meant a lot of people have questioned what it is that they're doing with their lives. My own career started off when I was looking for a job, just finishing college, and 9/11 happened, and the US had a lot of violent conversations. And meanwhile, in India, my home country, that year was also struck with terrorist attacks and really bad violent ethnic riots in Gujarat. And I was graduating and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I realized that it can't just be about making money. There had to be something more important out there. And that's just my own story. But, I know so many people who said that they could have been in the Twin Towers very easily on 2001, or, they lost all their savings in 2008 and they realized, what am I working for if it's just all about money? So I think that, those are a couple of the drivers. One of the things that's making it easier, of course, is technology. And the fact that so many things, let me put it this way, it's cheaper to have a good life today thanks to technology than it ever has been, right? So many things that even the poor today take for granted would have been considered unimaginable luxuries 100 years ago, right? So these are things that, so our lives are constantly getting easier because of technology. I'm not saying there are no downsides to that, but I am saying that it allows us to know that we can meet our basic needs easier than we ever could in human history before. And that allows us to think more broadly about what we want to do with our lives and how we can make a difference in our lives, right? And then finally, I would say, again, a lot of academic research coming out of the private sector showing that, companies that have a larger purpose than making money are doing better financially. So the bottom line, the profit is actually getting better if the company explicitly talks about having a larger purpose than just shareholder returns, and those companies are on the stock market outperforming companies that don't. Large private equity investors are starting to say they're going to more likely to invest in companies that are trying to mitigate the impacts of climate change, and that's causing huge ripple effects and so on. So I think there's a lot of these different factors that are coming together and pushing all of us to consider our careers in a different way than maybe our parents did 20 or 30 years ago.
So when you mention that having a higher purpose kind of gives you a sense of fulfillment and a sense of happiness, that seems very logical. But at the same time, it seems to me that everyone I know who's trying to pursue that career of purpose, there is a lot of anxiety and a lot of doubt that comes to even getting to the point of finding the purpose, not even yet putting the purpose into the picture. Do you recognize that? Why is it so hard for people to figure out what the purpose in their life is, or how to bring that into their work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was fortunate to kind of grow up professionally in the social entrepreneurship sector, where I was surrounded by people who had been blazing this path forward, and I've met 500, 1,000 the change makers, the social entrepreneurs who have been doing this without even questioning it in their minds. So for me, growing, as I was starting my career, it was easy to find these people and be inspired by them. But I recognize once I started getting into the work of helping more people to join the change making movement, so to speak, that yes, it is a big source of anxiety for a lot of people. And I would say there's a couple of reasons for that. The first is that we still don't know a lot about careers with purpose. And that, and you mentioned that we have a book coming out in the fall and that I'm writing with my co-founder. And we're trying to demystify a little bit like what it means to have a career with a higher purpose or a career of impact. And I think most people don't have much of a sense because traditional kind of knowledge we have about careers is a good career. What's a good career? Good career is where you're in banking or law or technology or whatever, and that's kind of what we're conditioned to think about it, and most people don't realize how large the range of opportunities in social impact today are and how much they've grown, especially in the last 20 years. So whereas like when I was starting my career, you probably had, UN agencies, big NGOs, a few social enterprises, government, that's what you were choosing from. Today, you've got on top of that, microfinance institutes and lots of consulting firms and research agencies, businesses with sustainability or impact departments, more social businesses than ever before. And so like the pool of options or the range of options is grown much faster than I think society's comprehension of that. And, about 2 years ago in India, we actually ran my organization, Amani Institute, ran a series of conferences in across the country to what we call demystify social impact careers. And we brought people from different walks of life together to kind of help the larger society understand that there's so many more options than ever before. So I think it's partly the fact that we don't know what all the options are, and partly the fact that we're still conditioned to think of a good career in very narrow and limited terms, that is leading to the sense of anxiety. And I think that like let's say if we were to look at the social sector as something in need of branding, it would probably be a combination of getting the information out there, telling really good stories of people who built these careers, and showing what's really possible, not just like at the level of people who win Nobel prizes, but also, ordinary people who are making these kind of choices in their lives that they lead. And hopefully that's what we're going to try and do with our book a little bit. But it'll just be one, more attempt out there. And I think it's kind of like, drip, 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 as Seth Godin says, that we just need to get these, keep pushing on this as well, so that people are aware of their options and hopefully therefore reduce the anxiety that comes from following them.
Yeah. And so what tip would you have for people that are trying to align kind of what they want to do with what they believe in?
I think there's a few different tips that I might have. Obviously the first thing to do is to realize what is it that you most care about addressing, right? And that doesn't have to be one thing. That could be several different things. Maybe you care about, climate change, but that's a really big field, right? Like within climate change, do you care about renewable energy? Do you care about wildlife conservation? Do you care about the impact of natural disasters on communities? Do you care about sustainable travel? Like what are the options within something like climate change? So each of these fields, whether you think of it as climate change or education or poverty alleviation, each of those have about 10 or 15 or 20 subfields within that. So I think exploring what are the different options for you within the field or the cause that you care about, and then looking at what are the job options or the organizations in those fields that might be interested in someone with your skills. So then understanding truly what are your skills, what are you bringing to the table, where can you get more skills that are needed, and then I think it can be a little bit kind of a detective a story to try to to go through what all the options are and identify, where you best fit. And now perhaps for some people, they just want to do good. They don't have a particular cause like climate change or gender equality that they care about, but they really want to use their design skills, or they really want to use their programming skills. Then I think you actually have so many options that it just makes sense to get started as soon, wherever you can, find a local organization that you really care about. Find a friend who's got, a fellow alumni from your university or your school who's doing work that you admire, and offer to support them in some way, whether you can spend some of your evenings or weekends doing freelance design work for them. In our book, one of the characters of our book is a freelance graphic designer who finds her way into a career of impact just by volunteering her services in her off hours. But you could do that in your off hours. You find other ways to contribute. So I think depending on which way you're trying to enter the space, whether from trying to contribute your skills, or whether it's trying to find a cause that you're really passionate about, I think the most important thing is to get started. Like, more than anything else, it's like start small, but above all, just start. And you'll find your way. It's really hard to again, it's like our education forces us to like analyze and research and think of all these possibilities. But it's usually much easier and less anxiety provoking that if you just get started at the nearest possible opportunity and then see how that grows over time.
Yeah. It's more of a prototyping your career kind
Yes.
of attitude than I need to dive into this the next 10 years. And this is a major leap and massive investment.
Exactly. I think, and again, we're so conditioned by society, by our parents, by our academic backgrounds to like think about what's our dream job and to find that and do that and nothing but that. But, I think like for most of us, let's say you're on this call and you're under the age of 40, which maybe most of you, or it's, under the age of 50, like you're going to be working, you're not even halfway through your career, right? So, and especially if you're under the age of 30, you're going to be working for longer than you've been alive. So like there's almost no wrong step you can take, I would say. There's our careers are long, and especially again thanks to technology, we're living longer lives and will be productive for longer periods of time as well. And so you've got lots and lots of time ahead of you. So I think see that as a way of something liberating, that whatever you do next, you can find your way to something excellent, rather than trying to find the dream thing just from inside your head or by doing online research.
Yeah, and I can imagine for anyone who wants to dive into this topic of prototyping your career, if you know the book Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett, I think that's a really great tip as well. I'll share that in the links later. So one of the things that you touched upon, like, oh, you can start with volunteering or you kind of have to make your way into this, is that there's this kind of sense that making a difference and making a living are mutually exclusive. And I think that in a way is causing some issues, like this dysfunctional belief that doing good has no financial value. Do you think they are mutually exclusive? And I'm guessing you think not, but I'm curious how you would unpack that topic.
I think a lot of it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how we just don't know what all the options are. Or most people don't know the wide range of options there is. And I'll start by saying, to some extent, there's some merit to the fact that you can't make a lot of money by doing good. And I think that that's right, because in some ways, it's the quest for more and more money that is leading humanity to a lot of the problems we're facing, right? Like that the environment can't handle our quest for, the planet can't handle our quest for sort of unending economic growth. The financial crises that that we've lived through in 2002 and 2008, a lot of that comes from the greed of people who just want more and more and more. And so as change makers, many of us are trying to solve the problems caused by sort of the unending quest for growth and money and, and greed. And so to some extent, there is some merit to the fact that if you're working in social change, there's got to be some limits to what you're pursuing. And I think that that's backed up by the fact that, modern positive psychology research and other show that actually there's diminishing marginal returns to money, right? Like there's a certain amount of money at which like making more money makes you happier. Right, and that is much less than you would think, right? Like I think in about 7 or 8 years ago, the answer in the US, so let's say the West more broadly, was around $80,000 a year. The more you make towards that, like if you're making $50,000, then 60,000 makes you happier than 50,000. If you're making 60,000, then 70,000 makes you happier than 60,000. But once you cross that 80,000 mark, whether you're 100,000, 150, 200,000, let alone a million, you're not actually any happier. And that is that, I don't know what those numbers are today, but I think that as a general principle of humanity, there is a point where more money is better. And then after that, more money doesn't make you any happier. And I think like we don't know that, like there's like, again, our modern society hasn't caught up to some of these like, truths that are coming out of modern psychology. So we have this quest that we need to make more money is the key to happiness, which it really, we should know better, I think, by now. So I think all of that's on the side of like, here's why it's happening. And then on the other hand, I would also say that it's increasingly not true as well, right? So there are many purpose-driven jobs where you can make a great salary. I bet many of you don't know that if you work with the UN or the World Bank, you don't pay taxes. So all of your money is yours. Increasingly, a lot of private sector companies are having departments in, sustainability and like chief impact officer. Now that I'm like, LinkedIn keeps poking me like every 2 days, telling me that Amazon is looking for a head of social impact in India. And I finally changed my LinkedIn profile, so I'm not living in India anymore. But that's Amazon, right? Microsoft, like all of them are looking for people, and those companies pay pretty good salaries. All of the big consulting firms, whether it's McKinsey or Bain or Boston Consulting Group, are looking, have social impact practices. They also pay pretty well. Social businesses pay, can sometimes pay quite well. And I learned this in a funny way, actually. So about in 2016, I did a TEDx talk in Amsterdam. And one of the things in my talk was, I was saying like, if working in social impact means you'll make less money, you'll work harder, and you'll fail more, but you'll be happier. And I returned to Kenya, where I was living at the time, and my Kenyan staff were upset with me, and they said, like, why did you say that thing about making less money? It's not true. And one of my colleagues, at the time, he worked for Amani Institute, our organization, and we were a local, social enterprise in Kenya. We were paying him more money than his wife, who was working at Standard Chartered Bank. They were the same age, right? So that's when I realized that Amani Institute is paying better than banks in Kenya. And I was like, hey, like, I'm a good employer. But I think like, again, people aren't aware that you can actually make a really good living in this. I mean, I have, family members working in, 5-star hotels in India that are at the, halfway through their career making less money than we pay, entry-level staff at Amani Institute in India. So again, like there is a lot of possibilities of having a good salary in the sector that I think, again, the branding of the sector hasn't caught up to the reality of it.
Yeah. Could you unpack a little bit, like, for instance, what kind of skills you teach at Amani Institute that you believe are at the core of a good career in social impact?
Sure. So at Amani Institute, we boiled it down to 4 buckets of skills, and we boiled that down based on a lot of research. into higher education. A lot of polling of employers around the world in terms of what are they looking for, and what we felt universities are not doing as well, and where we could make a contribution that universities were not making. And the four skills we narrowed down to were, firstly, creativity and innovation skills. Like that, for many employers, is the number one thing that they care about. Secondly is leadership skills. Third is communication skills, and that means both things like branding or social media, things like that, but also interpersonal communication skills, things like storytelling and giving feedback and listening well and so on. And then lastly, kind of a grab bag of like what we call management skills, but from financial management to technology to project management and so on. And so those are, I think, the four different sets of skills. Now, I think that those four things will serve you well regardless of your career, whether it's in social impact or not, because again, these are things that universities aren't doing so well at providing, and all employers need them. What makes them different in the social impact space is sometimes how they're applied. And that makes a big difference as well, because some of the challenges that you have in social impact, or let's say in government, I know there's someone from the Indian government here, those you have to apply it in a different way when you don't have money to throw at the problem. Let's say I can't hire McKinsey to come in and give me solutions. I've got to figure this out on my own, or I can't motivate my staff by providing them huge bonuses that are double their salary at the end of the year. So I've got to motivate them in other ways, and perhaps these staff wouldn't be motivated by money anyway. So how do I build a different set of leadership skills than maybe what a business school might provide? These are the kinds of skills that we explore at Amani Institute, and help people learn not just what the skills you need are, but also how do you apply them towards the cause that you care about, or towards social change.
I imagine that in maybe a decade, we're going to look back and think like it's amazing that we weren't teaching this as an actual skill before. I feel like, especially if you're here in Kenya, you see a lot of people come into this space feeling like, because I grew up in a society where a lot of stuff works, I can take that knowledge just as a citizen from kind of soaking it all up. I can take that and apply it somewhere else. But obviously there's a lot bigger challenges that that you're just simply not aware of in the ways that we create change. When you think about all the people that you've seen kind of go through the Amani programs, what are some of the surprising or interesting ways that you've seen people create careers of purpose? Is there one or two examples that you're like, wow, I'd never thought about that as an option, or this is an amazing way to make a difference that people often don't think about?
Yeah, I think of course there are so many stories, and it's hard to pick one or two. But like if I were to think about stories that surprise me, one example is one of our first Amani fellows from Brazil. His name was Morris, and he was a relatively young guy in his, I think, early 30s when he came to Amani Institute, and he ended up creating a platform for older people, people who've retired, to find purpose and employment in the second half of their lives. And it's something you wouldn't necessarily think a 30-year-old would be caring about or would be motivated to do. And when he came to Amani Institute, it was just an idea, but it's really grown now, and it's now like the reference point in all of Brazil, not just Sao Paulo, for people to find meaning and employment in the second half of their career. It's they run large events. They've got hundreds of thousands of Brazilians on their platforms, and so on. And I think that that's a beautiful story of kind of empathy and caring for excuse me, for another generation. So that's one story. Another one that I love to tell at Amani Institute, because it came directly out of our work in social innovation, is the story of a guy from Switzerland and a guy from India who created a organization in Kenya to help youth who live on the streets in Kenya to build, to give street tours in Nairobi. So when tourists come to Nairobi and they want to get, a tour of the city, rather than go to a tour company, these guys helped create a company where young, like youth from the streets, are the ones who are giving the tours. And and through that, through giving these tours, these youth who otherwise, most of them have been to prison, or who have few prospects in life, can actually make money and come out of poverty. And some of these young people who started off with them are now not living in the slums anymore, have apartments in middle class areas, and are helping the next generation themselves. And our two students, they got the idea from a course that we were doing, where we used a tool that you guys use a lot, probably as branders, is in reframing. And so they reframed their question from how can we help youth in the slums in Kenya, to how can youth in the slums in Kenya help us. And it was that reframe that allowed them to come up with this idea. They've now turned the company over to Kenyan youth from the slums. Neither one of them is directly involved anymore. And that company is now, I think it's number 1 or 2 in the Airbnb experiences, TripAdvisor recommendations for things to do in Nairobi, and it's grown really well. So that's just a couple of stories, and I'm aware that I've told stories of entrepreneurship, and those are in some ways the easier stories to tell, because they require less context, because there was nothing and then there was something. But of course, like the majority of our fellows are not entrepreneurs, and they are doing incredible, day-to-day work inside organizations, what we call intrapreneurship sometimes, or just, being a fabulous first-class employee in a change-making organization, or being a consultant, or a freelancer. And those stories are harder to tell in a short talk, because you'd have to give so much more context. But they're no less, I think, powerful or meaningful as the stories of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's what you mentioned about LinkedIn previously. So I'm in touch now with people from 8 or 9 different cohorts, and when you see their careers evolve on LinkedIn, it's quite interesting. We see people who are now like doing innovation at the UN refugee organizations, and you see their activities scroll by, and it's interesting and fulfilling to kind of see that happen, I'm sure. When you think about careers in impact as a kind of marathon and not a sprint, so one of the things that I've noticed is that people who pursue a career purpose find out that actually it isn't like a band-aid to all issues, or necessarily like, yes, it gives you greater happiness, but it also can be quite frustrating and hard. And you see a lot of beneath the happy LinkedIn newsfeed updates, there's sometimes a lot of heartbreak. So what would you recommend for people to kind of take care of themselves while they support others?
Yeah. I think, again, it's like just going back to the start of the question, it's really important to be aware when you get into the business of solving social problems, that these problems have been around for millennia, right? And they're unlikely to go away anytime soon. That doesn't mean we shouldn't give everything we can to making them go away, but be okay that you may not end poverty, or educate all children in the streets in your lifetime, right? And I actually find that liberating. Like, I don't feel like I need to make sure that there's no poverty left in the world by the time by the time I die. And I think sometimes we put the pressure on ourselves to say, like, I've got to solve this problem in my lifetime, and that's unrealistic. I feel, right? Some of these things are reflections of the shadows of human psychology. If you look at trafficking today, it's like part of the shadow of slavery, I would imagine, and that's been with us as long as humanity. These problems aren't going to go away anytime soon, but we can do our best to make a contribution towards that. I actually find that liberating, not depressing. And I think once you've once you've accepted that, then it becomes obvious that what you've got to do is to prepare yourself to give everything you can in what time you've got, on the planet. And that means to take care of yourself over the long haul. It's not like a 10-year sprint and I've solved human trafficking, or there are no hurricanes causing refugees anymore, right? Some of these problems may actually increase in the short term, with thanks to inequality or climate change or polarization and things like that. Um, and so I think, like, what's really important is to realize that I've got to take care of myself. Like, what they say in airlines: put on your own oxygen mask first before helping someone else. That's valuable, because if you don't put on your own oxygen mask first, you won't be able to help anyone else. And so I think it's important for us to take care of ourselves, so that we can do a better job of taking care of others, or taking care of the planet for longer periods of time, which is what we all need. And so, if in the short term you really need to, make some money to educate your children, or to take care of a sick parent, do that. There will be time to come back to leading, a life of purpose in the long term. And again, it's not a mutually exclusive thing. You can make money and take care of your parents and have an impact all at the same time. So these things are all possible to do together, but realize that it's going to take a while. And so ways in which you can prepare for that is being patient with yourself, investing in the things that make you a whole person, whether that's relationships, whether that's your hobbies, music, whether that's your spiritual practice, whatever that may be, and so on. So invest in the things that keep you, grounded and whole over the long haul. Those are a couple of things that come to mind right now. There are a number of other variables that matter, such as making sure that you have empathy, but not too much empathy, so that you're not bogged down by the suffering of others, and burn out or get depressed. There's a whole bunch of other variables as well, and we'll be sharing all of that in our book coming out second half of this year. But you can also learn more about that, by taking a course at Amani Institute, where we talk about that quite a bit. And I believe applications for our next classes are ongoing until the end of June. So if that's something that's interesting for you, you can look at it there. But those are all ways in which you can learn better how to manage yourself, as much as you manage the change that you want to see in the world.
I can definitely recommend. I mean, for me, it's been eye-opening to see the social innovation management program. So anyone who's interested in that, I can recommend it. I hope that we'll be able to do it physically again, so I can see people's faces. Yes. But otherwise, I mean, I can see people's faces on screen. Obviously, I want to see the bottom half of people's bodies, actually. So I want to open up the room a little bit for other people to ask questions. So if there's anyone who has a specific question about something that they're struggling with in their career, I'd love to hear from you. While you guys think about what questions you might have, potentially. One last question from my end, Roshan. So as you're kind of navigating through your own career, you've made some interesting twists and turns. And I imagine that for many people who are either making a switch at a later age, or still trying to find their way, maybe from traditional university education into the change space, like, your career can be hard for others to follow. And I've heard you talk about, like, telling your career story more effectively in order to kind of, make your way into creating a career with impact. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you think about when you think about telling your career story more effectively?
Yeah, well, I actually think that my career story is fairly easy to follow, because unlike most people of my generation, I've only had 2 jobs in the first 20 years of my career. So like the first 10 years, I worked at an organization called Ashoka, working in social entrepreneurship. And for the last 10 years, I've been, I co-founded and have been leading Amani Institute. And so I think it's fairly unusual actually to have just two jobs before you're 40. But the way I tell that story is that, I made the decision early on coming out of university to build a career in social impact and to work in social entrepreneurship. And for the first 10 years, I made a career out of supporting social entrepreneurs all around the world to help them grow their organizations and increase their impact. What I didn't realize that was happening through that period was that I was building a path towards having a career in social impact. And 10 years into this career, people who thought I was crazy when I, made the decision to say no to a big fancy consulting firm and go work in a nonprofit in India for, a fraction of the salary. Those same people were calling me and saying, "How do I build a career in social impact?" As well. And so I realized that, unknowingly I had, built some knowledge about how to do this. And so the next 10 years of my career became about helping as many people as possible from all around the world also make that switch to a career in social impact or career of purpose, however you want to call it. And that's what I did for the next 10 years of my career. And so for me, it's kind of like fit neatly into kind of these decade-long eras. First 10 years of supporting entrepreneurs, the second 10 years of being an entrepreneur and supporting other people. And as you said, Anne, I've stepped down, as CEO of Amani Institute. I'm taking a year off at the moment just to, rest a bit and figure out what I want to do next. And then I don't know what the next 10 years or even 5 years are going to be, but I'm sure that it will involve taking what I've learned about social entrepreneurship, taking what I've learned about leadership development into something new. And I don't know what that is just yet. So that's kind of how I'm telling my story. And the arc of that story is, one which I think has like fairly easy to follow markers. If I was to give kind of general advice to people, it's realizing that people are moved by stories. And so if you can tell the story of your career as in a story, right? And stories have a structure. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They've got a protagonist, in this case, you, trying to solve a problem, and overcoming that problem to making to making a change. And they have a moral of the story, a lesson, that we can all learn from it. If you can start to look back at the defining moments of your career, the defining moments of your life, and see how to put that in the structure of a story, then you'll be good at conveying that story, that structure, conveying that story to other people in ways that will make them inspired and want to hire you, want to work with you, want to employ you, and that will make it easier for you. And so I think there are some basic principles of storytelling that can be applied to telling your own life story in this way.
I imagine that this also becomes easier if you know where you want to go, so you know what you're trying to convey with your story.
Yes. It does become easier if you know where you want to go, and I think in some ways that's important. But I don't think the where you want to go needs to be an unchanging destination, right? It could be a changing one. Maybe where you want to go is finding purpose, right? Maybe where you want to go is, making an impact in your city in the next 10 years. It doesn't have to be like the final, end of life, end of career destination. It could be a destination for 1 year from now. It could be a destination for 5 years from now. And that can change then each time. So again, I would say like, make that destination something that is tangible for you and also therefore for your audience. And if that's an interim destination, that's fine. It's the journey, as we all know anyway, not the destination. So I think like pick a destination that is close by, not one that is, ending poverty in my lifetime, right? Like that, that's quite far away.
I also always love it when people's story ends with a question. when they're
Yes.
still searching, right? And
Yes.
so that also invites a lot of participation and conversation into your life if you're willing to just, instead of always feeling like I need to provide the answer to this question, or there needs to be a closing point, like start with how might I contribute to, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. I'm gonna.
Yeah, and I think that, sorry, if I can just come, like,
Yeah.
one closing comment on that point, since you said ends with a question, it reminded me of one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's from actually a spy novel, so not from any deep piece of philosophy, but the line goes like this. It says, sometimes we have to do a thing in order to find out the reason why we did it. Sometimes our actions are questions, not answers. And I think that that's a nice way to think about, your career story as
I think I need to read more spy novels.
well.
Cool. Does anyone have a question for Roshan? Feel free to turn on your mic. There might be something in your own career that you're thinking about that you might want to change, or something that you're struggling with. I know we have different people with different vocations and different steps in the group. I don't want to call people out, but I know I
have a question.
Hi, June, welcome.
Hi, thank you. My question for Roshan is, while you were working at Ashoka, did you have an idea then that you would start the Amani Institute, or did the inspiration hit later? Because you mentioned that you already wanted to work in social, impact, but did you always know that you would now end up, starting a whole institute in this area?
Sure. Thank you, June. The answer is no, I didn't know. I never saw myself as an entrepreneur, to be honest. And I actually have no background in education, no formal training in education, no professional background in education. So, we started Amani Institute in 2011. If you had told me in 2009 that 10 years from now, I would be invited to give talks on education and win awards in education, I would have laughed at you because I had zero background in education. So I did not, the idea came over time, and it actually came not from a background in education, but from a background in having lived through the challenges of building a career in social impact and realizing that there were teachable lessons that came from that and from the lives of all the social entrepreneurs I had, worked with all around the world, and that those questions that they had faced were common, whether they came from Chile or South Africa or Indonesia, or Germany. And I think that it was the analysis of putting all of that together that really helped me come up with the idea. And then there were many touch points in my career at Ashoka that that eventually led to coming up with the idea for Amani Institute, and that would be too long to go into. But the quick answer to your question is, for the first 8 years of working in Ashoka, Amani Institute didn't even exist in my imagination, and it only came about in the last couple of years, and then I left Ashoka to pursue it.
One of the things that your story always strikes me as is, this is a very classic example of an insight, which is where also all strong brands begin, right? It's a moment where it could be like a bolt of lightning kind of aha moment, or a growing sense of hey, there's this issue in the world that no one's addressing, and we could build a product or service around it. So it's almost the classic example, which is, I think, why Amani Institute is also one of the examples that we actually show in the book in the insight generator.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, it was the insight that our universities are failing us, and it's not their fault, because they were fundamentally not set up to help people build careers. They're set up to be centers of learning. And if we were setting up a university today in the 21st century, there's no way we would do it, like how universities have been set up since the 1700s. So with that insight, is what we used when we, that helped us jump off the cliff to start Amani.
Cool. We have a question on the chat from Ranjini. What are your thoughts on building social entrepreneurship skills in school children? From Anjini's experience working at the grassroots level, she believes developing capacity with incubation space training in rural areas, it could go a long way in creating impact.
Sure. Hi, Ranjini. I'm from Bangalore too, so it's nice to see a fellow Bangalorean over there. I think that the earlier we can get started with building social entrepreneurship skills in people, the better. But I wouldn't even necessarily call it social entrepreneurship skills. I would take it like one step below and call it just creativity or innovation skills. You know, the ability to see a challenge and overcome it, like problem solving, I think is what I'm looking for. If we can help people solve problems, you know, and build the skills to solve problems. And I don't mean math problems, you know, from your textbook, but like real life problems. That would go a long way, I think. And, you know, if we're working with young children, then we have to work not just with the children, but with their parents. And, you know, this may be different in different countries, but certainly in India, one of the biggest challenges to pursuing a career in impact is the role our families play in what our career choices we make. Now, I know that's less the case in Europe, but in India, you can't make a decision about a career without bringing your parents on board or your grandparents on board. And so that makes it harder sometimes when our parents have no idea, even less idea than we do, of the options out there. So, you know, we used to joke in Amani in India that we don't just have to recruit students, we have to recruit their parents too. So we actually had a FAQ that the students could send to their parents about the program, you know, because we had to answer the parents' questions, and the parents even may get it, but they have to answer the neighbors' questions or the auntie's questions, you know. And so for us, branding in India had to also, like, we had to give not just the student, convince the student, but to help the parent convince the, you know, the neighbor or the auntie, like, why their child should do this program, right? So I think in India, the parents will matter a lot, and that's possibly the case all around the world with young children. So it's not just about, you know, building the creativity and problem solving skills in young children, but also helping parents and teachers see the importance of that, that we need to do as well.
It reminds me a lot of the process that I went through when you teach at design and art schools. You know, even in countries where the creative industries are massive and there's careers plenty, you still get the parents at the open day. You still get the parents with the 19-year-olds who are like, can my child make a living as a designer?
Yeah. Yeah, and in many ways, that's the job description of a parent, right? Like, is to worry about your children and to make sure that they will be cared for and provided, they can care for and provide for themselves after you're gone. And parents can't rest until they can answer that question. So it's like having empathy for parents while also realizing that they don't know, they don't have the full scope of knowledge, and it's not their life anymore. So it's like, you know, balancing those two things, I think, is helpful.
And I imagine that having the support of your parents when you're trying to build an alternative career is quite important, no matter what your cultural background.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. We're at the full hour. I just want to check, is there anyone else who has a question for Roshan? Do you have a few more minutes, Roshan?
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah.
I'm retired anyway now. So.
Well, retired means you probably have plans.
Yeah, no, I'm just joking. But yes, I have some time.
Yeah.
Can I go again?
Sure, why not? Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm actually an Amani fellow, and so for me, I'm curious to understand, you know, what was the inspiration behind the curriculum that was developed there? Because, I mean, it's a very diverse, and, you know, considering the fact that you said you've not come from an education-based background, how you put together, you know, the various topics that we discuss or we study, because I find it, I mean, it's all very interesting and very disruptive. So for me, I would just like to know, was it based on your experience that you put this together, or did you like have a meeting to discuss with fellow educators to create the curriculum as it is?
Mm-hmm. And June, just for me to know, which year did you do the Amani program?
Oh, I'm currently in the program.
Ah, excellent. Okay. So, firstly, I would say that the curriculum has changed over the years. So, what you're doing now, the basic principles and building blocks existed 10 years ago when we were starting Amani, but, a lot of it has changed as well. And how we built it was, a combination of our own lived experiences. My co-founder, Elena, and I, she grew up in Argentina, had a very different career prior to Amani Institute than I did. But we were both ended up working at Ashoka, where we met and came up with this. So we reflected on our own lives and how we had people asking us, how do they get into this kind of career? So that was one. The second was looking at what was wrong with higher education. Where was it failing? Where was it not meeting the needs of employers? Where was it not meeting the aspirations of students? And what could we contribute to that universities were not able to contribute? Again, we had empathy for universities because we realized that's not what they're supposed to be doing today. And we needed to help them basically, or help people find another way than just universities to get the skills and the training that they needed. So that was the second piece. The third piece was just like asking employers what they needed and how we could best design for that. The fourth was looking at the practices or the best principles of adult learning that are coming out in the field of education but are not being applied in universities again. So so a lot of the methodologies, June, that you and Maria, who's here, and others have experienced are coming from very clear principles of adult learning that we're not used to in our formal education systems. Fifth, I think, was looking at the lives of all of these, not just us, but like people who we can say that they have changed the world, and seeing what have been the building blocks of their life, what are the core skills that they exhibited, and how can we start to apply those skills in larger numbers of people. So there was a number of things. Of course, we learned from other organizations like Think or McKinsey or other organizations that we admired and who built like frameworks that we follow. And again, like there's the constant process of seeing what works, adjusting it, receiving feedback from our students and Amani fellows, and altering the curriculum to meet those needs as well. So constantly updating, constantly changing. Fill out those course surveys you get, because we really take them into account when we're changing the curriculum and improving it as well.
Cool. We have a comment from Josa that I think is quite nice.
Yes.
Josa works with human rights advocates. I can imagine life is rough for them, and
it's probably one of the areas within social impact that I have the most admiration for. I think it takes real courage, sometimes physical courage, to put yourself in harm's way for the sake of other people, and particularly in certain countries in the world today, where it's getting harder and harder to do that. My own country is one of them. I imagine Philippines is another. And I have just lots of admiration for people who are giving their time to human rights. It's one of the hardest parts of the social sector. So keep going, Josa. Congratulations on what you've accomplished so far, and keep going because the world needs you.
That's a nice one to tuck in and take heart. Cool.
The world needs all of you, actually. We are all needed, I think, to do everything we can. So maybe that's a good note to end on. And like, it's sometimes hard, even if you're not in human rights, like even, if you have a privileged life as well, it's hard to find a life of purpose. That's how we started this, but there are ways to do it. There's lots of people who've walked down that path before, and don't ever doubt that your contribution is needed, or that you can't make a difference, because you absolutely can.
Yeah, I'm also often surprised by all the ways that you can make a difference personally and professionally, and I almost feel like there must be people who who profit and benefit by making you feel like you don't have any power to change anything. And actually, we know as for a fact that some people profit by propagating that.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time, Roshan. Thanks everyone for coming. If you have more ideas of who you would like to speak to or which topics you would like us to discuss in the next Hangout, always feel free to reach out to us and let us know. We don't have a lot of friends that are at Roshan's level of fabulousness, but we can try and make a few new ones if you need us to. So let us know. And thanks again, Roshan, for making time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I'll share
Thanks,
a link.
everyone. Yeah.
I'll share a link to the Amani Sim program for those people who are interested.
Super. Thank you,
Okay.
Anne. Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good
Thanks for
day.
joining. Have a good day, good evening, wherever you are. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.